Hello, bonjour. Did you know India's history, like Europe's, has had some of the most unexpected twists? Historical figures whose actions cause major upheavals and change history's course. Political and military successes such that these figures become true legends in their country, almost sacred. Today, we'll discover one together. And I promise you, if you're interested in the Napoleonic epic, if Joan of Arc intrigues you, and if you enjoyed following Game of Thrones, you're going to be in for a treat today and throughout the entire trilogy. And yes, during this mini-series, you will discover how a young warrior and later a Hindu statesman transformed his territory from this to this. And why a mini-series? Well, because beyond the fact that it's a fascinating moment in history that I really enjoy sharing with you, this will allow us to really understand the context, the developments, and the stakes in a region that has experienced a history and realities fundamentally different from our own. Without this, would we have more trouble understanding? It's the 17th century in the Indian subcontinent. It has faced multiple Islamic invasions, resulting in several Muslim states. At that time, the famous and powerful Mughal Empire was one of them. Yes, you heard right, Mughal, not Mongol. This name isn't coincidental. The Mughals are descended from Turco-Mongols, which explains it. But they are culturally Persianized and Muslim, so they basically belong to the dominant culture of Persia, which means Iran at that time. In the center of the subcontinent, several sultanates are competing for political supremacy in the region. After joining forces to eliminate the final major Hindu kingdom, Vijayanagar. Meanwhile, to the west of the Deccan Plateau, which you see on the screen, as well as on the coast, lived a mainly Hindu people who shared a language and a culture whose earliest traces date back to the 1st century Common Era, the Marathas. They were a people whose way of life was, at the time, unique. The 14th century invasions by Muslim forces had effectively destroyed the previous Hindu social organization. Society had to reorganize itself afterward. Without revisiting the Indian caste system already covered on this channel, this phenomenon would cause major changes within the Maratha castes. In fact, over a period from the 15th to the 17th century, a new warrior caste would emerge, the Maratha caste. At the time, this caste's definition was much vaguer and evolving than what we think of today. We also mentioned this system when discussing caste history. It appears the Maratha caste originally descended from various peasant castes. According to Gordon Stewart, following the social collapse of Maratha societies caused by the Islamic conquest, they saw an opportunity for social advancement while defending their interests by taking up arms. In fact, they began by serving the local rulers as early as the 15th century before organizing themselves into opportunistic and mercenary warrior bands, with leaders at their head, some of whom would go on to found true warrior dynasties and later ruling dynasties, all while specializing in horseback combat. At the same time as these developments, the territory of the Marathas, Maharashtra, was essentially under the control of the various sultanates of central India, which I mentioned a little earlier, although it would be the Sultanate of Bijapur that would eventually temporarily stand out among them in the region. However, Maharashtra was at that time poor and sparsely populated except for the northeastern coasts of the region. And why? Well, mainly because Maharashtra was regularly ravaged by wars between the different Muslim states, and the famines it caused, when those famines weren't caused or even worsened by bad monsoons, logically led to regular drops in population and population displacements, to the point that it was normal for many villages to take in refugees, other refugee villages who in return accepted the work given to them by the village chief. Historian George Stewart notes that every region in Maharashtra faced armed conflict about once every 10 years. This continued through the 17th century when our subject evolved. Honestly, it's really tough. In 1630, in a fort near Pune, the son of a prominent Maratha at the Bijapur Sultanate's court was born in this environment. Shivaji, our subject of the day. He would profoundly change an unstable territory during his life. Eventually, the entire Indian subcontinent, then dominated by a Muslim elite, experienced this. As you understand, Shivaji will grow up amid turmoil and move frequently until age 6, from fort to fort during the wars, with his mother and tutor. In 1636, Shivaji's father was granted land by the Sultan for his mercenary services to the Sultanate. Among these lands is Pune, which he will nominally entrust to Shivaji, and in practice, of course, to his son's tutor. The latter will manage and repopulate a city that was nothing more than a hamlet, taking the opportunity to train the young Maratha in the management and administration of a territory. Shivaji will be trained in warfare, a duty of his Maratha caste, and with young local Marathas from various social backgrounds. He will also gain a deep Hindu education. Thus, Shivaji is credited in 1645 with formulating the Hindavi Swaraja, which literally means Hindu self-governance, unlike the period's reality when Muslim states dominated the territory. This idea, which will matter later, is more political than religious. The main idea is that Hindus, as the majority, should govern their lands and control their destiny, and no longer depend on the goodwill of a Muslim elite that had gradually taken control by force over much of the territory. A similar concept was developed much later during the British occupation by Gandhi, who spoke of Swaraj in Hindi, meaning self-governance, but this time for all of India and its diversity. 2 years after forming his political ideal, in 1647, Shivaji's tutor died, and the young Maratha became Pune's true administrator. That's when he'll start his rise. By 1655, he gradually took control of the Pune region by capturing local forts. In 1656, he began to expand by seizing lands clearly outside the territory to which he could lay claim. This would add to regional chaos as the Sultanate of Bijapur was also entering serious political turmoil. The Sultan, aging and ill, is about to die. This leads to multiple power struggles in the Sultanate, as factions vie for control before the old Sultan's death. It's a classic in Indian Muslim states where sons, brothers, and heirs fiercely fight each other. The death of a ruler in order to seize the throne. In fact, the neighboring Mughal Empire, a major power at the time, is also interested in the matter. And that's not going to be good for the Bijapuris, who are supposed to be allies of the Mughals, an alliance that will end soon after the Sultan dies. When the Sultan dies in 1656, his son, Ali Adil Shah II, takes the throne. Except that the Mughal emperor at the time, Shah Jahan, believes that the throne of Bijapur should come under his control. And so, despite his alliance with Bijapur, he sends his son, Prince Aurangzeb, to seize it. I told you it was intense. Successions in India? Shivaji, for his part, is going to play a double game in this story. On one hand, he will offer the Mughals passage through his lands, and maybe even give them a helping hand in return for official recognition of his seized lands. Meanwhile, he exploits the Mughal advance to plunder cities behind their lines in imperial territory in order to get money for his treasury and horses for his cavalry. Aurangzeb is not going to like this, not at all. Right now he has other matters to handle, especially one, Ali Adil Shah. The Mughal prince leads a large, organized, and equipped army to Bijapur's gates, arriving without trouble, which was simply unable to put up any serious resistance due to the political chaos it was in. While everyone was tense, everything changed when Emperor Shah Jahan died, and Prince Aurangzeb learned of it during the siege. This causes him to abandon his conquest of Bijapur to claim the Mughal Empire's throne from his brothers. Ali Adil Shah II, likely fearing for his life, will survive and stay on the throne. In return for some northern concessions, Shivaji will exploit the resulting political vacuum near his home to seize part of his territories. Yes, Bijapur has given up its lands, but the Mughals, busy with civil war, haven't sent administrators or a garrison yet. In short, Shivaji cleverly and logically seized the opportunity. Still, he's taking a big risk. It's not a weak sultanate provoking him, but a strong empire that may want to reclaim its land after the civil war. He will use Aurangzeb's departure in 1659 to strengthen his power in the region. By seizing new forts and territories, especially along the Maratha coast, which is called the Konkan coast, by confronting local lords, Muslim, Abyssinian, and yes, you heard right, Abyssinian. The latter reached India through Islamic conquests and, to a lesser degree, via the Portuguese. Some came as merchants, others as adventurers, but the majority as slaves or freed former slaves. Shivaji will organize his territory with a standard government for the subcontinent, but also includes some meritocracy, which I'll discuss later. The government consists of a prime minister, the Peshwa, and related elements. More innovative. For India, after his coastal conquests, he will work hard to build a Maratha fleet of fast, sleek ships to protect the state's commercial interests. This is an uncommon interest for Indian powers, who favor continental domination and have little interest in maritime issues. By late 1659, Maratha controls much of the Sultanate and 40 forts and outposts, according to Stewart, which, in my opinion, gives the most credible estimate. Able to mobilize 7,000 professional cavalry, 10,000 infantry, and 3,000 irregular infantry, whose mobilization is more complex. In short, regionally, he's becoming a serious force and openly wants independence or at least autonomy. Quick side note, returning to my earlier suggestion, Shivaji was a meritocrat. Of course, he surrounded himself with Hindus whom he considered competent, but he also didn't hesitate to surround himself with Muslims or Christians, Portuguese in this case, if he considered them reliable and competent. He had Muslim regiments under his command, Muslim commanders who followed him and were part of his military council, as well as an important Muslim minister. He delegated navy development to skilled experts, specifically the Portuguese and Muslims of different backgrounds. Muslims and Christians are a minority, both among Marathas and across the subcontinent. It's crucial to understand this mindset to view Shivaji's ideals in Hindu Swaraj accurately. The return of political power into the hands of the majority Hindu population, as well as the end of their submission to a Muslim elite and the laws they impose. It's not a societal conspiracy or a holy war against non-Hindus. At the same time, a few years after the big Mughal scare, and after having time to recover, the Sultanate of Bijapur finally went on the offensive against Shivaji. To do this, at the end of 1659, the Sultan sent a general with a fearsome reputation, Abdullah Batari, better known as Afzal Khan, which is also an honorary title given to Muslim princes and generals in India. Afzal's stated goal is to kill the Maratha by any means necessary. The Queen Mother of Bijapur suggests he kill the Maratha with a dagger during a meeting. Why is his reputation so fearsome? Well, because he doesn't do things delicately. Efficient but lacking principles. For example, he has shown in previous operations that he doesn't hesitate to kill or capture his opponents right in the middle of negotiations, which works out well since for him, the civilians of a territory are a means of pressure that he doesn't hesitate to exploit, quote unquote. Not to mention his contempt for Hindus, whom he has repeatedly faced and defeated in southern India. In short, besides being highly influential at court, he checks all the boxes. For a general who has been asked to crush what is considered a rebellion, Afzal departs with a strong professional army, though its size, as usual, varies by estimate. I think Grandduff's estimate of 5,000 cavalrymen is the most credible, representing a strong professional force. 7,000 well-trained infantrymen, several war elephants, some Ambarak artillery, that is, cannons mounted on camelback, and a logistics train. So that's more than 12,000 men, probably 15,000 in reality, if we go by this estimate. Others suggest a figure closer to 10,000 men. To detail its composition, let's just say that it's a professional army designed for the classic Indian warfare of the time, meaning combat in open terrain. Regardless of the exact numbers, the key point is that the young Maratha army was still much weaker than a regular army of the time. Although it seems possible for the Marathas to mobilize more men, the quality of the troops they could mobilize meant that this army couldn't compete with the Bijapuri army in a regular battle. A metaphor to maybe make it a bit clearer and to help you visualize it. In a judo match, two lightweights against a Teddy Riner, It's always Teddy Riner, heavier and perfectly trained, who even though outnumbered wins, especially if it's on a tatami mat. That's the confrontation forming, especially since Shivaji lacks his full army for this battle. In short, this justifies the Maratha army's concern, if not fear, of this army. The Bijapuri army, led by one of the great military figures of the Sultanate, Afzal, as an experienced commander, knows that he must force the Marathas to fight in open terrain in order to have a decisive advantage. He states at the start of his campaign that he'll reach his goals using terror or diplomacy. So for him, diplomacy is scaring Shivaji's supporters enough to make them surrender the Maratha leader. So he's planning to reach his goals using terror. With this in mind, Afzal readily desecrates Hindu temples and humiliates and enslaves Brahmins, or Hindu priests. So he will take them prisoner and ravage the territories he passes through. Historian Sarkar describes the devastation as ruthless. I told you he's not a gentle man. He clearly didn't come for a friendly gathering, or if he did, it's one nobody wants to attend. Shivaji, with a lightly equipped army and only fort artillery, knows he can't match the heavily armed Bijapuri army in traditional battle. He'll try to turn his weakness into strength by staying close and luring the Bijapuri army. On terrain where their heaviness is a disadvantage, he can exploit his light troops' strengths. That's how he eventually manages to lure Afzal with his army. At the foot of Pratapgarh Hill, where there is a fort he controls and the terrain is rugged and wooded. That's where he will secretly gather his forces and prepare for a diplomatic meeting. The two protagonists arrive determined to settle things by force, not to negotiate. In short, a great atmosphere. In fact, when the two men meet, things escalate quickly. Afzal reportedly starts the confrontation, though debated, by grabbing Shivaji's neck as he bows to greet him. Clutching him tightly, the Bijapuri general attempts to stab him. However, the Maratha, aware of the danger ahead, wore chainmail under his clothes as preparation. The Muslim's blade can't pierce it. Shivaji, who only came up to Afzal's shoulders. Here too, a dismissive comparison with Tetahuddin Eriner would be quite appropriate. Despite the embrace, he manages to strike him with a bagnak, or tiger claw, which is an Indian weapon that can be concealed in the palm of the hand. With this claw, he eviscerates Afzal before stabbing him. And as a result, Afzal ends up dying anyway, leaving the Bijapuri army without a leader. Afzal's guards farther away hear the screams and commotion. Shivaji and a companion escape the meeting point by fighting before the battle begins. The Bijapuri army, lacking both its commander-in-chief and a real battle plan, expected events to unfold differently. Confusion reigns, as I quote Sarkar. The bushes seemed to come alive, and this was due to an extremely mobile harassment tactic employed by the Marathas, who were more lightly equipped than their opponents, attacking, retreating, and moving through the woods to appear numerous while staying elusive. Confusion turns to panic, causing Afzal's army to break and leave 3,000 dead, as well as a rich booty made up of cannons, elephants, muskets, camels, jewelry, and more. This will help the Marathas strengthen their army. Afzal Khan's army has been completely routed, causing an unexpected political shockwave in the region. The Marathas spend several days hunting fugitives in the jungle and capture the late general's sons. And yes, just imagine the newspaper headlines if some rookies managed to beat Teddy Riner. Well, it's the same thing here. Additionally, several of my usually disagreeing sources agree. Shivaji will show great mercy towards the prisoners he captures, sending them back home with enough to make the journey. This victory will also free the civilian prisoners. What did Afzal do on the way? Along with his magnanimous attitude, it will win him new support among Hindus initially mobilized in the army. Bijapuri thus further strengthened his army and allowed him to extend his authority. Shivaji's first victory over a major power marked a major turning point for the Maratha. He is now viewed as a serious threat that no Muslim power can exploit for long. Shivaji always either brushed off the offers or used them to buy time, and this, unlike what could have happened in the past with other Maratha leaders. There is no turning back from this point on. He is and will remain surrounded by enemies all his life and will only be able to survive by keeping his opponents at bay.